Weak law enforcement. Several laws have been passed to combat the evil of corruption, but their lax enforcement has made it difficult to do so. What effects might corruption have? On individuals and public life, judiciary corruption results in insufficient justice, and the offended parties might endure consequences. Due to a lack of evidence or even evidence that has been destroyed, a crime may be proved with the benefit of the doubt. The inquiry process has been ongoing for decades as a result of police corruption. Regard for officials in society. The people have less esteem for national leaders like the president or prime minister. The main standard in social interactions is respect. People vote in elections because they respect the candidate and hope that the winner will raise their standard of living. People will lose respect for politicians if they are corrupt, and they won't want to vote for them if they are aware of this. Regarding the economy, a government official who must approve clearances for projects or industries delays the procedure in order to profit financially and receive other illegal benefits. Investments are delayed as a result, and industries take longer to launch and flourish. Companies are reluctant to establish themselves in areas without good access to electricity, water, and roads, which impedes the region's economic development. Way ahead. Civil Service Board. The government can reduce undue political interference by establishing the Civil Service Board. Simplifying disciplinary procedure, it is possible to prevent dishonest civil officials from holding sensitive positions by streamlining the disciplinary procedure and stepping up preventive vigilance inside the departments. Stress value based training. To preserve integrity in public life, it is crucial to stress value based training to all government officials. Code of Ethics for Civil Officials, based on the recommendations of the Second Administrative Reforms Commission, ARC, a thorough code of ethics for civil officials was demanded and should be a fundamental component of all training programs. Reduce delays. In light of the significance of good institutions for good governance, it is necessary to re-engineer our institutions and streamline the procedures in order to reduce delays and guarantee timely service delivery. Dark patterns are a moral UI, UX, user interface, user experience, interactions that are intended to deceive or fool users into doing something against their will. Digital platforms violate users' rights to complete disclosure of the services they use and control over their browsing experience by employing dark patterns. Ethical concerns associated with dark patterns. To their advantage, social networking businesses and large technology companies like Apple, Amazon, Skype, Facebook, LinkedIn, Microsoft, and Google use sneaky or dubious techniques to degrade the user experience. Pop-up ads from Google-owned YouTube push users to join up for YouTube Premium while covering a video's last few seconds with thumbnails from other videos. Users are harmed by dark patterns because they compromise their online experience and leave them more open to financial and data theft by big tech companies. Dark patterns trick consumers, present online barriers, lengthen the completion of routine tasks, get them to sign up for undesirable services or products, and coerce them into paying more money or disclosing more personal information than they had originally meant. 145 PRAHAAR Redefined 3.0 Ethics. Way ahead. Dark and misleading patterns are not limited to cell phones and laptops. Internet users can select more user-friendly platforms that will respect their right to choice and privacy if they are able to spot and distinguish dark trends in their daily life. Balancing development and environmental protection. The main causes of climate change and its consequences are changes caused by humans in the exploitation of the natural world for economic gain. This is a result of the underlying assumption that while environmental regulations have been perceived as limiting economic prosperity, development policies really encourage it. Therefore, it is necessary to strike a balance between economic development and environmental protection in order to achieve sustainable development. Balancing development and environment protection. Developmental factors affecting the sustainability of the environment. Way forward. One of the main causes of preventable deaths from natural disasters is the disregard for environmental standards. Any effort to determine a region's risk from natural disasters scientifically is hardly ever made in the correct spirit. Unrestricted quarrying and the haphazard cutting of hills from slopes raise the danger of landslides by escalating the likelihood of soil erosion. The connections between underdevelopment and environmental degradation often get worse as the population grows. Additionally, poverty creates strong motivations for having big families and encourages migration, which renders urban places unsustainable from an environmental standpoint. Agenda 21, the UNCEDS Blueprint for Sustainable Development, places a strong premium on the adoption of win-win policies that take advantage of the synergy between environmental protection, economic efficiency, and poverty reduction. The following actions can be taken to put this vision into action. Economic policies that are prudent may aid in achieving environmental sustainability. Examples include the rationalization of price subsidies, the clarity of property rights, and the facilitation of technology transfer. By rationalizing subsidies, you can save money, increase productivity, and considerably reduce pollution. Indigenous knowledge and understanding of big ecosystems can be useful to regions and nations. The importance of integrating biodiversity issues into global decision-making is highlighted by the relationship between biodiversity and environmental sustainability. Conclusion: humanity's main goal and greatest struggle continue to be development. However, poverty, starvation, and environmental degradation still exist on a worldwide scale despite the unheard of economic and social development made over the past century. Therefore, development objectives must be accomplished without violating environmental laws. Ethics of global governance: the economy and social order are supported invisibly by a good governance model. It is time for the world to transition from its outdated models of governance to Governance 4.0, which was put forth at the World Economic Forum's Davos Summit and focuses more on inclusive, long-term strategic thinking. Significance of ethical global governance strategies for long-term strategic planning in Governance 4.0. Long-term strategic thinking must replace the current short-term management under Governance 4.0. Environmental aspect: actions to combat climate change, stop biodiversity loss and environmental damage brought on by human activity, and handle related issues like forced migration must be combined with a focus on issues like the pandemic, socio-economic crises, and people's mental health. 146 PRAHAAR Redefined 3.0 Ethics. Companies to assume responsibilities: the previous top-down strategy and tunnel vision will be replaced with the new model. The duties of each stakeholder in society must shift in the complicated, linked, and discontinuous environment we live in. Changing priorities: it is time to stop emphasizing a limited understanding of economics and short-term financial concerns. Any new system of governance must instead be based on the premise that society and nature come first. New leaders, business executives that support environmental, social, and governance metrics as well as some political leaders are among the many leaders eager to usher in a new era of governance. Such trailblazing leaders who advocate for specific action to combat climate change and address social injustice should be commended for acting outside of their narrow interests. Today's best indicators of responsive and accountable governance assess how much a leader accepts stakeholder duty over shareholder responsibility. Thus, it will be necessary for leaders to embrace a new, inclusive governance paradigm in order to address global issues. Corporate governance is the set of laws, customs, and procedures that regulate and control an organization, and is essential to ensuring that enterprises are operated morally and in the best interests of their stakeholders. Corporate governance principles fairness. The board of directors is required to treat all stakeholders fairly and equally, including shareholders, employees, vendors, and communities. Transparency. The board should notify shareholders and other stakeholders in a timely, accurate, and understandable manner on issues like financial performance, conflicts of interest, and hazards. Risk management. The board and management must identify all potential hazards and decide how to most effectively control them. Responsibility. The board is in charge of regulating business operations and management decisions. Accountability. The board is responsible for evaluating a firm's capability, potential, and performance along with the company leadership. Ethical issues associated with the corporate governance, separation of ownership and management. In family-run businesses, the division of ownership and management continues to be a major obstacle for the majority of businesses, including some of the top ones in India. Conflict of interest. The issue of managers potentially benefiting themselves at the expense of shareholders. Weak board. There have been concerns regarding the board's ability to act in the shareholders' overall best interests. Independent directors. Independent directors lack the ability to check the unscrupulous behavior of promoters since they are partisan. How can corporate governance be improved in India? Better boards have more diversity. Diverse, in this sense, refers to a wide range of characteristics, including gender, ethnicity, aptitude, and experience. Effective and rigorous risk management policies. It should be adopted in order to improve decision making and get a deeper understanding of the risk-reward trade-offs that all corporations must make. Specialized rules of the organization. An organization's board must have in place particular rules to direct organizational behavior because it is ultimately responsible for all actions and decisions made by the company. Evaluation of the board's performance. By resolving the issues raised by board evaluations, boards should strengthen their governance procedures. Facilitating communication between shareholders and the board. A contact person must be made available so that shareholders can talk to them about any issue. 147 PRAHAAR Redefined 3.0 Ethics. Key terms. Key terms. Impartiality, accountability and transparency, good governance, nepotism, favoritism, political partisanship, participatory governance, colonial legacy, culture of corruption, service delivery, effective policy making, behavioral parameters for development administration, traditional public administration, development administration, 3SIE, efficiency, economy and effectiveness, entrepreneurial government, voice power, RTI, Lokpal and Lokayukt, Official Secrets Act, OSA, Whistleblower Protection Act, Indian Evidence Act, violation of organizational culture, moral commitment, integrity and devotion, code of conduct and code of ethics, citizens charter, coercive corruption and collusive corruption, e-governance. Previous year questions. Previous year's questions here. 1. Write a note on probity in public life. 2022. What do you understand about the term good governance? How far have recent initiatives in terms of e-governance steps taken by the state have helped the beneficiaries? Discuss with suitable examples. 2022. Theme. There is a view that the Official Secrets Act is an obstacle to the implementation of the Rights to Information Act. Do you agree with this view? Discuss. 2019. 4. Explain the basic principles of Citizens Charter movement and bring out its importance. 2019 5. The Right to Information Act is not all about citizens' empowerment alone, it essentially redefines the concept of accountability. Discuss. 2018. 6. Discipline generally implies following the order and subordination. However, it may be counterproductive for the organization. 2017. 7. Today we find that in spite of various measures like prescribing codes of conduct, setting up vigilance cells, commissions, RTI, active media and strengthening of legal mechanisms, corrupt practices are not coming under control. Evaluate the effectiveness of these measures with justifications. B. Suggest more effective strategies to tackle this menace. 2015. 8. Some recent developments such as introduction of RTI Act, media and judicial activism, etc. are proving helpful in bringing about greater transparency and accountability in the functioning of the government. However, it is also being observed that at times the mechanisms are misused. Another negative effect is that the officers are now afraid to make prompt decisions. Analyze this situation in detail and suggest how this dichotomy can be resolved. Suggest how these negative impacts can be minimized. 2015-148 PRAHAAR Redefined 3.0 Ethics. Chapter 11 Current Affairs from Ethical Point of View. Russian War and Cognitive Dissonance of During COVID-19 Treatment. Context: people of Russia whether to support their country or lean towards humanism. COVID-19 treatment and medical experts. What is cognitive dissonance? It is mental conflict or discomfort which occurs when a person holds conflicting beliefs or when actions contradict their beliefs. Cognitive dissonance is a sense of internal anxiety that is experienced when a person holds two inconsistent cognitions. In other words, cognitive dissonance is when your behavior is in contradiction to your belief system. Examples: people believe that drinking and smoking are injurious to health. Still, they drink and smoke. Russian people have been facing cognitive dissonance whether to support their country in these testing times or lean towards humanism for understanding the plight of the Ukrainian people. Eating meat while also thinking of themselves as an animal lover who dislikes the thought of killing animals. Purchasing the new car that is not fuel efficient, despite being environmentally conscious. Telling a lie despite the person thinking of themselves as honest. Causes forced compliance behavior. Sometimes one might find oneself engaging in behavior that is opposed to one's own beliefs due to external expectations. This might involve going along with something due to peer pressure, prior commitments, or as one's duty-making decision. When faced with choices which involve conflicting beliefs, people often are left with feelings of dissonance. Gaining new information. Sometimes learning new information can lead to feeling of cognitive dissonance. For example, if you engage in a behavior that you later learn is harmful, it can lead to feelings of discomfort. Effort. Putting a great effort in achieving something, later realize that the accomplishment was not really that special, then it can cause serious cognitive dissonance. Change the conflicting action or behavior, reduce the significance of the conflicting belief. Signs of cognitive dissonance: feeling uncomfortable before doing something or making a decision. Trying to justify or rationalize a decision that you've made or an action you have taken, feeling embarrassed or ashamed about something you've done and trying to hide your actions from other people. Experiencing guilt or regret about something you've done in the past. Sense of internal anxiety that is experienced when a person holds two inconsistent cognitions. 149. PRAHAAR Redefined 3.0 Ethics. Coping with cognitive dissonance. Changing attitude. Be open to new information. Question the value of conflicting cognitions. Case study A. Cognitive dissonance among medical experts due to COVID-19. Recently, a number of medical experts wrote to health authorities to stop the use of medications and diagnostics that are inappropriate for the clinical management of COVID-19. This was the result of persistent cognitive dissonance faced by doctors due to issues like use of limited efficacy drugs with greater risks over its benefits, violating the medical ethics of beneficence, maximum good. Doctors' cognitive dissonance over use of unreliable drugs or wait for proper drugs availability. Use of high-cost drugs with no national task force endorsement and informed patient consent, i.e., violation of autonomy. Doctors' cognitive dissonance due to price and inconsistency between CDSCO-approved COVID-19 drugs and drugs endorsed by National Task Force on COVID-19. Example: Itolizumab, a monoclonal antibody, with a price of 32,000 rupees for 4 vials, was approved by CDSCO after trial over 30 patients. Increased hospitalization cost and black marketing during COVID-19, violating the medical ethics of equality, equity as well as moral ideals like justice and proportionality. All this cognitive dissonance led to irrational drug use, higher costs for patients and confusion within the medical community, leading to moral distress. Ways to overcome cognitive dissonance in this situation: coordination. Address the lack of coordination between the National Task Force on COVID-19 and Central Drug Standard Control Organization, CDSCO. Transparency. The drug's approval should be more transparent, i.e., open and accessible for all to avoid misuse of power and make citizens more aware. Objectivity. CDSCO should have more objectivity in drugs approval to avoid hasty approval and ensure that the efficacy of the drug is periodically monitored. Awareness. The medical professionals and citizens should be made aware of pros and cons of drugs to remove moral distress and ensure informed consent. B. Cognitive dissonance among Russian people over war or the Russian invasion of Ukraine highlighted the ambivalent attitude of many Russian people whether to support their country in these testing times or lean towards humanism for understanding the plight of the Ukrainian people. This has been due to cognitive dissonance faced by people because of issues such as disinformation. It has become a primary vehicle of the war waged by the Russian Federation against Ukraine, leveraging entrenched narratives to convince Russians how its military forces carry out a special military operation to liberate the people in Ukraine. State censorship and biased pollsters. Censorship over liberal voices and making a narrative in the favor of Russia by the state-run media has been causing biased opinions. Brainwashing through media censorship, state propaganda, and disinformation are leading cognitive dissonance among the people. 150. PRAHAAR Redefined 3.0 Ethics. Geopolitical tensions, Cold War among world powers fumes feelings of chauvinism among common people. As a result, people start thinking of their own country as a super aggressor and zero tolerance towards others. Use of lethal weapons causing death of innocent people in Ukraine. Mass killing and destruction of infrastructures bringing thought of empathy towards humanism for understanding the plight of the Ukrainian people. Way forward or international cooperation to establish peace or compassionate view towards vulnerable sections or mutual agreement for long-lasting peace or end of arm race or mutual respect for respective sovereignty. Opinion polls and ethical issues. Context: issue with authenticity and transparency of opinion polls for the recently conducted assembly elections. Opinion poll. An opinion poll is a pre-election survey to gather voters' views on a range of election-related issues. On the other hand, an exit poll is conducted immediately after people have voted and assesses the support for political parties and their candidates. Since this exercise has become more of a ritual, it is required to connect such polling directly to morality and democratic processes. Some opinion polls may be sponsored, motivated and biased. Also, almost all polls are non-transparent, providing little information on the methodology. With such infirmities, many polls amount to disinformation that can result in undue influence, which is an electoral offense under IPC Section 171(c). It is a corrupt practice under Section 123(2) of the RP Act. It is unethical to release such data on the eve of an election since it can impact the mind of the voter. Ethical issues with the opinion polls. Paid news. It is a very common action. Therefore, it is highly possible that some opinion polls may be sponsored, motivated and biased. Undue influence. Opinion polls directly affect the sanctity and integrity of the electoral process. They are able to influence electoral behavior and distort electoral outcomes. Disinformation. Almost all polls are non-transparent, providing little information on the methodology. With such infirmities, many polls amount to disinformation that can result in undue influence, which is an electoral offense under IPC Section 171(c). It is a corrupt practice under Section 123(2) of the RP Act. Suspicious affair. A survey getting some elections right is not proof of its credibility or robustness. Bandwagon effect. The bandwagon effect claims that voters jump on the bandwagon, which means that if a party is gaining in the polls, the party will gain additional support from the voters, and vice versa if the party is losing in the polls. Issues with the smaller parties. It adversely impacts the small and new parties because the voter sees two things, which is the party he likes and whether it is in a position to win. Vague and excessive claims. Pollsters make matters worse by making excessive claims, nothing short of black magic. Less focus on methods. A general unwillingness on the part of polling agencies and the media to share even basic methodological details about their polls compounds the problem. Based on negligible data, due to this, the opinion polls do not reflect the actual figure. Also, they are telecast before the elections only to benefit select political parties. Way forward. Code of conduct. There should be a code of conduct for the opinion polls. Sampling frame, sample size and the exact technique used to draw the sample. The social profile of the achieved sample to be disclosed. 151. PRAHAAR redefined 3.0. Ethics. Transparency. The ownership and track record of the organization carrying out the survey, details of the sponsors to be made in public, effective alternative method. There is required efforts to explore alternatives to the present procedure of the opinion polls, alternatives that have been successfully used all over the world. Methodology. Raw vote shares reported in the survey and how they were converted into vote estimates and seats forecast. Conclusion. Opinion polls do not just reflect the opinions of people but influence them to create an aura of winnability. Analyzing the vulnerability of voters to such influence, there is a crying need to regulate this to protect the sanctity of India's democracy. Once in place, such a mechanism would help the public tell the difference between a genuine and rogue poll and incentivize transparent practices. Ethics of METAVERSE. In the digital realm, code dictates life. The time has come when life should dictate the code. Context. Recently, in Tamil Nadu, a couple hosted India's first wedding reception in Metaverse. The bride's father had passed away but attended and blessed the couple in a digital avatar at the wedding. Metaverse is a combination of multiple elements of technology, including virtual reality, augmented reality, and video where users live within a digitally enhanced surrounding. Ethical issues related to METAVERSE. Biometric data and privacy. Virtual and augmented reality devices are set to provide users with access to the metaverse but will track brainwave patterns and deduct user thought processes. This technology will offer companies exciting new ways of engaging with consumers and predicting their behaviors, but it also means that even more of our intrinsically private and personal data can be gathered, stored, and kept on the blockchain forever. Protecting the vulnerable. The vulnerable section, i.e., children, senior citizens, and digitally unaware, among others, are more vulnerable to the influences of the metaverse environment. For example, hyper-reality experiences could trigger a sensory overload and induce fits or seizures in users who have a disorder like epilepsy. Toxicity. Platforms like Metaverse have become a breeding ground for toxicity, bullies, and hate speech. People vocalize opinions that they would never express in real life. Issues of inequality in the tech industry. Inequality in digital space has created a new class of haves and have-nots. As a result, the socio-economic divide has been aggravated. The prevalence of metaverse could create further divide due to economic capacity, urban-rural gaps, etc. Lack of decentralization. A centralized metaverse which is governed, owned, and operated by tech giants, then the problems such as data privacy, thefts, manipulations, and conditioning to favor some and not to favor some, will come to rise. Misuse and unfair ownership of data. In a seamless environment such as metaverse, it would be difficult to implement the current consent-based permission structure for private data, resulting in muddled ownership of data and increased vulnerability to misuse. Translation of laws and rights from real to digital space. In the absence of a regulatory framework in the form of laws, it is difficult to understand what are the rights that will be protected and how will they be protected. Psychological issues with multiple identities. Metaverse would enable the individual to create a digital identity without the pushes and pulls of the society and the situation one is born in. This could create more identification with the digital identity, leading to issues like self-pity and dissatisfaction with oneself in reality. Way forward. Regulatory frameworks and awareness. Preventing cyberbullying and sexual harassment and ensuring inclusivity through community guidelines and privacy protections. Projects involving children or other vulnerable populations should be given special consideration. 152. PRAHAAR Redefined 3.0. Ethics. Consumer-centric approach. All aspects of metaverse to be examined thoroughly, which affects the life of the consumer legally, personally, socially, and emotionally. Decentralization. A democratized platform by all and for all will provide an environment of transparent and safe digital space. Transparency in data collection. Ensuring that privacy policies specifically mention metaverse data and how that data will be used, shared, and protected. Tackling inequality in the tech industry. For the metaverse to be inclusive, digital divide to be bridged by reducing existing inequalities and creating digital environments where everyone can belong. Secure the experience. Use the best security protocols and protection to ensure that malicious actors cannot alter or harm users while they are in the VR experience. For example, a community member might get voted off the island if enough token holders think someone is not operating in a way that adheres to the community guidelines. Guiding principles. Engaging in the METAVERSE. Ethical skill set, appreciation for universal rights, self-esteem, sense of security. Issue of insecurity could get aggravated in the metaverse as peer comparisons are more engaging and closer to reality. Right to equality. Equality in the metaverse would imply equal right to digital spaces and actions for equally situated people, digitally. Emotional intelligence. It is important that the user has emotional understanding of differences in their experiences of the real world in the metaverse. Right to freedom. Within the boundaries collectively agreed by the platform and the participants, the user should have all the freedom that they enjoy in real life. Flexibility, adaptability, engaging in the metaverse prerequisites intellectual and emotional adaptability towards experiences. Right to privacy. In this data-driven ecosystem, the right to privacy is a sine qua non for fair and just participation on the platform. Regard for others. For metaverse to be a community space, it is important that the users regard the existence of other users with respect. Right to security. It is the right of the user and responsibility of the platform that every participant is secured from issues like emotional trauma, cybercrime, digital abuse. Understanding of digital etiquettes. Like real life, the digital life would also have social norms which extend beyond the rigid rules. Example: not intervening in digital spaces uninvited. Right to non-participation, exit. The user needs to be accorded a right to exit on lines of the right to be forgotten. This would entail ensuring non-usability of the information generated and created by the user, such as their digital home, avatar, etc. Conclusion: in this dynamically evolving domain, to ensure that these principles are incorporated in both letter and spirit, the platforms, developers and users will have to innovate continuously and proactively. Global Agreement on Ethics of Artificial Intelligence. Context: the United Nations adopted a historical text defining the common values and principles needed to ensure the healthy development of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, I. It is a branch of computer science that deals with creating computers or machines as intelligent as human beings. It refers to the ability of the machines to perform human intelligence processes like thinking, perceiving, learning, problem solving and decision making. 153. PRAHAAR Redefined 3.0. Ethics. AI doesn't have to be evil to destroy humanity. If AI has a goal and humanity just happens to come in the way, it will destroy humanity as a matter of course without even thinking about it, no hard feelings. Elon Musk, on emotionless AI. AI ethics is a system of moral principles and techniques intended to inform the development and responsible use of artificial intelligence technology. Ethical challenges with AI explainability. When AI systems go misaligned, teams need to be able to trace through a complex chain of algorithmic systems and data processes to find out the reason. Organizations using AI should be able to explain the source data, resulting data, what their algorithms do and why they are doing that. AI needs to have a strong degree of traceability to ensure that if harms arise, they can be traced back to the cause. Risk of unemployment. The hierarchy of labor is concerned primarily with automation. Robotics and AI companies are building intelligent machines that perform tasks typically carried out by low-income workers. For example, self-service kiosks to replace cashiers, fruit-picking robots to replace field workers, etc. Responsibility. Society is still sorting out responsibility when decisions made by AI systems have catastrophic consequences, including loss of capital, health or life. Responsibility for the consequences of AI-based decisions needs to be sorted out in a process that includes lawyers, regulators and citizens. Misuse. AI algorithms may be used for purposes other than those for which they were created. These scenarios should be analyzed at the design stage to minimize the risks and introduce safety measures to reduce the adverse effects in such cases. Tech addiction. Technological addiction is the new frontier of human dependency. AI has already become effective at directing human attention and triggering certain actions. When used right, this could evolve into an opportunity to nudge society towards more beneficial behavior. However, in the wrong hands, it could prove detrimental. Discriminating robots. AI systems are created by humans, who can be biased and judgmental. It can create AI facial recognition and surveillance technology that discriminates against people of color and minorities. Data privacy concerns. AI also presents serious data privacy concerns. The algorithm's never-ending quest for data has led to our digital footprints being harvested and sold without our knowledge or informed consent. For example, the case of Cambridge Analytica, in which such algorithms and big data were used to alter voting decisions. AI turning against humans. If artificial intelligence itself turned against humans, then it will become catastrophic for humanity. For example, if an AI system is asked to eradicate cancer in the world. After a lot of computing, it spits out a formula that does, in fact, bring about the end of cancer by killing everyone on the planet. Way forward, whole of society, approach to AI governance will enable us to develop broad-based ethical principles, cultures and codes of conduct. Given the global reach of AI, such a whole of society approach must rest on a whole of world approach. Awareness among the executives, data scientists, frontline employees and consumers all need to understand policies, key considerations and potential negative impacts of unethical AI and fake data. Strike the right balance between AI promotion and AI governance. Executives need to architect AI systems to automatically detect fake data and unethical behavior. Organizations need to invest in defensive measures rooted in open, transparent and trusted AI infrastructure. Conclusion: the world needs rules for artificial intelligence to benefit humanity. 151. PRAHAAR Redefined 3.0 Ethics. The recommendation on the ethics of AI is a major answer. Without ethical guardrails, AI will widen social and economic rift, amplifying any innate biases at an irreversible scale and rate and lead to discriminatory outcomes. Custodial violence. Context: recent death of a father-son duo from Tamil Nadu, allegedly due to custodial violence, has sparked anger across India. As per the report of National Crime Records Bureau, NCRB, the number of deaths in police custody between 2001 and 2018 was 1,727. But only 810 cases were reported, 334 were charge sheeted, out of which just 26 policemen were convicted. Custodial violence. Custodial violence primarily refers to violence in police and judicial custody. It includes death, rape and torture. Justification of torture in certain cases. Different perspectives. Utilitarian view believes that an act is right if it brings about the greatest good for the greatest number. Example: if someone has kidnapped a child and left him, her to die somewhere. In this case, if torturing someone is the only way to find out the whereabouts of the child, then it might be the right thing to do. In similar cases, if torturing a terrorist uncovers a plot, then it might save many lives. Categorical imperative. As per Immanuel Kant's theory, not hurting others is a categorical imperative, which all human beings must follow throughout their lives. Torture is unjustified as it consists of intentional infliction of severe physical, mental or emotional suffering on the other person. Immanuel Kant also said one should never treat people merely as instruments, and just as means to one's goals. Example: there's a difference between a tape recorder and a person. If you're having trouble getting information out of a tape recorder, you can pound on it or kick it. This may not be very effective, but it isn't immoral. But if you want to get information out of a person, you should convince them to tell you what you want to know. Human rights approach: torture of human beings consists of curtailment of individual autonomy. Given the moral importance of autonomy, torture is also unjustifiable on this account. It is sometimes also used to suppress independent thought and make people comply with the more accepted beliefs of the society. Torture treats the victim as a means to an end and not an end in themselves. It often explicitly dehumanizes their victims to make it easier to torture them. It violates the rights and human dignity of the victim, including the legal right to remain silent when questioned. Consequentialist arguments against torture: torture is a slippery slope. Each act of torture makes it easier to accept the use of torture in the future. 155 PRAHAAR Redefined 3.0 Ethics. Ineffective tool: it is an ineffective interrogation tool as there is no guarantee that the person who is being tortured will give the correct information, because under torture a prisoner will eventually say anything to stop the pain. More effective methods of interrogation that don't involve torture are available. Also, if a suspect is tortured, it may be impossible to prosecute them successfully, as many countries' laws, including India, excludes involuntary statements or confessions on the ground that such evidence is inherently unreliable. Torture damages the humanity. Those who carry out torture are likely to become brutalized by their acts, and desensitized to humanity. Institution: torture damages the institution that carries it out. It damages the reputation and moral authority of the institution. Its use is likely to produce internal dissent among the members and so damages the integrity of the institution. Use as propaganda and the non-state actors: torture provides the enemy with something they can exploit for propaganda. Example: terrorist organizations like ISIS use state brutalities as an excuse to radicalize the youths to pick up arms. Way forward though: torture is unjustified from many ethical perspectives, but there may be situations when the unity and integrity of the state is under threat or the lives of innocent people may be in danger. Under such situations, a law enforcement officer or a person with noble intentions might feel compelled to undertake any means necessary to protect the country or to save their lives. It is important to note here that the actions of the officer in such a scenario are guided by the supreme value of nationalism and protecting lives. Thus, it would be unjustified to conclude that the person undertaking such an action is ethically wrong. Thus, the issue of torture is complicated and needs to be discussed in public domain to evolve a consensus on the same. The feedback of the states on the draft Prevention of Custodial Torture Bill will be the first step towards developing consensus. Later, views of the civil society and legal and ethical experts should also be solicited. India should ratify the UN Convention Against Torture. It will mandate a systematic review of colonial rules, methods, practices and arrangements for the custody and treatment of persons subjected to any form of arrest, detention or imprisonment. It will also mean that exclusive mechanisms of redress and compensation will be set up for the victim besides institutions such as the Board of Visitors. Police reforms, guidelines should also be formulated on educating and training officials involved in the cases involving deprivation of liberty, because torture cannot be effectively prevented till the senior police wisely anticipate the gravity of such issues and clear reorientation is devised from present practices. Access to prison: unrestricted and regular access to independent and qualified persons to places of detention for inspection should also be allowed. CCTV cameras should be installed in police stations, including in the interrogation rooms. Surprise inspections by non-official visitors, NOVS, should also be made mandatory, which would act as a preventive measures against custodial torture, which has also been suggested by Supreme Court in its landmark judgment in the DK Basu case in 2015. Implementation of Law Commission of India's 273rd report. The report recommends that those accused of committing custodial torture, be it policemen, military and paramilitary personnel, should be criminally prosecuted instead of facing mere administrative action. Conclusion: torture is always wrong, and it should always be illegal. Those who torture put themselves at risk of legal punishment. But there may be cases where they can show good reasons why torture was necessary. Hence, custodial torture must always be done as per rule of law. It should be used as a tool in order to ensure safety and security of citizens and nations. Use of bulldozer and principle of natural justice. Context: recently, it has been alleged that the authorities riding bulldozers have razed buildings or house extensions built illegally in neighborhoods that recorded communal clashes recently in Delhi, Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat. Critics have called these demolition drives a move to bulldoze a particular community. But officials defended their actions as routine exercises against illegal constructions. 156 PRAHAAR redefined 3.0 Ethics. Uttar Pradesh and Karnataka, Haryana have laws in place for the recovery of damages to the property during a disturbance. From the administrative point of view, it may appear to be reasonable, but it also endangers the fundamental rights of citizens. Issues of encroachment: constriction of the public space. Land is a scarce commodity, and when the unplanned, illegal structures are built on public land, it results in constriction of the public space like public roads. Pedestrians would suffer as people would have fewer spaces to walk. Non-enforcement of strict regulations regarding the public encroachment by the local authorities provides encouragement to the public to take this issue lightly. Lack of basic amenities. Areas coming out of illegal construction lack basic amenities such as water, electricity, sewage system, leading to health issues. Issues of law and order. Unauthorized colonies also face issues of law and order, as access of police gets limited due to temporary structure and constricted spaces. Vulnerable to disasters. Disasters such as fire, waterlogging on rainy days and extreme weather, etc. Unplanned growth. The unplanned growth of city population and expansion of slum areas cause difficulty in expanding developmental work. Ethical issues of anti-encroachment drive hardship to common people. The worst hit in the anti-encroachment exercise have been the pool of several thousand workers whose livelihood vanished. Loss of physical asset. Anti-encroachment drive causes destruction of physical structure, it leads to loss of wealth and makes many people homeless. Loss for the society. Children and old age people suffer a lot. Their school schedule gets disrupted and old age people experience acute shortage of water, sanitation, medication, etc. Justifying the demolition's punitive action. Actions such as demolition of illegal structure against an accused person can demotivate others to act unlawfully or take law in his, her hand. Free constricted space. Anti-encroachment drives pave the way for the availability of open space, and the public could get better life experiences. Many development projects have come to a halt due to the issue of land encroachment on public land. Road widening would be a problem as it is occupied by religious structures. Pedestrians would suffer as people would have fewer spaces to walk. Avoid interfaith tension. Illegal constructions are used to create religious structure. Later, the same structure can become a bone of contention among groups. Increase in revenue of the authority. Local and state authority can use the increased revenue post demolition in the rehabilitation of needy people. Way forward rehabilitation must be fixed according to the community or category of people being displaced, which should ensure them basic amenities, creating awareness among the lot about community rights provision, compassionate ground to be adopted towards vulnerable sections such as pregnant women, children, old age people, right to hearing and principles of natural justice to be followed. Demolition of illegal structures of accused. Context: Uttar Pradesh and Karnataka, Haryana have laws in place for the recovery of damages to the property during a disturbance. From the administrative point of view, it may appear to be reasonable, but it also endangers the fundamental rights of citizens. Ethical issues in demolition of illegal structures. Fairness. It involves a procedural requirement. It is also known as substantial justice or fundamental justice, universal justice, fair play in action. Action should not be taken based on political vendetta. 157. PRAHAAR Redefined 3.0. Ethics. Impartiality. The principles of natural justice should be free from bias and parties should be given a fair opportunity to be heard, and all the reasons and decisions taken by the court should be informed by the court to the respective parties. Biased implementation of laws not only violates the fundamental rights enshrined in Article 19 of the Constitution, freedom of expression, but it also reflects the mentality of the executives by leaving the scope for different interpretations. Restoration. Resorting to the destruction of the properties of alleged wrongdoers by means of bulldozing is clearly against our constitutional ethos in the criminal justice system, as also in violation of the rights of accused persons. Violation of right to property. According to Article 300A, no person shall be deprived of his property save by authority of law. However, actions which take away a person's property without accordance with an act or rules or other statutory instrument passed by the central or state government, a violation of right to property. Absence of law for demolition. In any case, even if certain people are ordered to pay compensation under the rule of law and their properties are attached to ensure payment is made, there is no provision in the law for the demolition of properties. Neither the Parliament nor any state legislative assemblies allow the demolition of property of those accused of being involved in riots and damage to public, private property. Conclusion: any country which doesn't want to be a dictatorship or a feudal monarchy has to follow the principles of natural justice. These principles find their mention in the Magna Carta, which argues in favor of the trinity of hear, interrogate and adjudicate. The contentious practice of using bulldozers to pull down residential and commercial properties of persons suspected goes against the spirit of impartial justice and results in irreparable harm to the residents of the area. The consequence of rampant bulldozing without proper hearing will be faced by common people of another community. These actions are short-lived, but the scar has a lasting impact and raises questions about the justice delivery mechanism in the country. It is important that the court should send a message indicating that the rule of law firmly prevails in India. Journalism. Context: recently, the government has issued an advisory letter to the media on television coverage of the Ukraine-Russia conflict and the recent violence in Delhi's Jahangirpuri. The objection pointed out that in the recent past, several satellite TV channels have carried out coverage of events and incidents in a manner which appears to be unauthentic, misleading, sensational, and using socially unacceptable language and remarks, offending good taste and decency, and obscene and defamatory and having communal overtones. These appear to be violative of the program code and infringement of the provisions of subsection 2 of Section 20 of the Act. The Ministry of Information and Broadcasting has blocked several YouTube news channels from India as well as Pakistan for spreading fake news. Ethical principles of journalism based on Gandhian principle, truth, fairness, humanity, or utilitarian principle, minimizing harm, avoiding libel, or truth and accuracy. Journalists cannot always guarantee truth, but getting the facts right is the cardinal principle of journalism. O independence, journalists must be independent voices. They should not act, formally or informally, on behalf of special interests whether political, corporate or cultural. They should tell the audience of their political affiliations, financial arrangements or other personal information that might constitute a conflict of interest. O fairness and impartiality, most stories have at least two sides. While there is no obligation to present every side in every piece, stories should be balanced and add context. Objectivity is not always possible and may not always be desirable. Example in brutality or inhumanity, but impartial reporting builds trust and confidence. O humanity, journalists should do no harm. Their reporting or broadcast may be hurtful, but they should be aware of the impact of our words and images on the lives of others. O fairness, in addition to being independent, journalists should show impartiality and balance in their reporting. Most news stories have more than one side, and journalists should capture this. 158 PRAHAAR Redefined 3.0 Ethics. O avoiding libel, this is a legal as well as a moral imperative for journalists. Journalists cannot print false statements that damage a person's reputation. In most jurisdictions, true statements cannot be libelous, so journalists can protect themselves by rigorously checking facts. O proper attribution, journalists must never plagiarize. If they use information from another media outlet or journalist, they need to attribute it to them. O harm minimization, journalists should follow the utilitarian principle while showing news. Not every fact that can be published should be published. If the amount of harm that could come to private individuals, particularly children, as a result of disclosure exceeds the public good that would come of it, then news outlets might choose not to publish the story. Journalist ethics violation: publishing allegations by a single source without attempting to verify accuracy. Omitting facts provided to the journalist that would clearly lead the reader, viewer to a different conclusion. Calling for comment after normal business hours when there would have been time for the journalist to call earlier. Using editorial positioning of quotes to impact readers' conclusions, e.g., putting quotes critical of an organization in the lead paragraphs. Biases in ideology and focus on sensationalization of news to increase TRP. Media trial by the journalist. Example: Sushant Singh Rajput case. Conclusion: there are scores of codes and statements to guide journalists in their important work of sharing information with the public. Adhering to the ethical guidelines brings transparency and accuracy in the information. It serves the core function of the fourth pillar of democracy. Refugee crisis. Context: recently some people from Sri Lanka came to Tamil Nadu as a refugee because of economic stress. In a recent incident, an Afghan refugee posted a photo of food served at a US camp on Twitter and was met with severe criticism combined with sympathy from some corners. People from Ukraine have been seeking shelter in different parts of Europe. The Chekma and Hajong refugees who once lived in the Chittagong hill tracts, most of which are located in Bangladesh, have been living as refugees in India for more than 5 decades. Rohingyas seeking shelter, safety from religious persecution in their own country. About refugee. According to the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, a refugee is someone who has been forced to flee his or her country because of persecution, war, or violence. Example: Rohingyas seeking shelter, safety from religious persecution in their own country. The refugees also have an impact on the economy and society of their host nations. Large numbers of refugees can have a devastating impact on the host nation. Large number of refugees actually lose their lives while trying to reach different countries which give them shelter. They could be used by terrorist organizations, for sex or slave trade etc. Thus denial of basic human rights leading to disruption of global peace. It is often seen that immigrants are exploited for their cheap labor. Immigration sometimes also becomes a social or political issue. Racism is used to exploit feelings or as an excuse for current woes of the local population. Why are refugee rights becoming a favor on part of the states? The core issue in this scenario stems from the lack of empathy within the public of the host nation and limited resources at the ground level. These core reasons manifest themselves in following ways. So mistrust is a norm. Lack of empathy with the refugees creates mistrust about the culture, situation, and genuineness of their claim at asylum. This translates to a general policy of rejecting claims, making grant of refuge a special favor. 159. PRAHAAR Redefined 3.0 Ethics. Perception as an economic competitor, limited opportunities combined with the image of a refugee as a freeloader from the other nation, creates a perception of them being unworthy of rights. This makes grant of rights a favor which is subject to collective sympathy. Viewed as a security threat, the mistrust combined with lack of awareness and misinformation creates fear and makes the local population view refugees as a security threat. This indirectly increases the conditionalities on grant of rights, thus making it more like a favor by states. Issue of legal enforcement limits enforceability of rights. The limitation of international laws makes refugee rights contingent upon the discretion and perception of the host country. Example: many European countries tend to be more sympathetic to LGBTQIA refugees when compared to victims of war crimes in African countries. Limited capacity of the host. Fulfillment of all rights of refugees is dependent upon the capacity of resources within the host countries. Example: in many developing countries, right to housing cannot be fulfilled for the domestic population, guaranteeing the same claim for refugees becomes difficult and hence becomes selective. Politicization of the issue. The image of the refugees, the associated fear, psychosis, and political implications of assimilating the refugees leads to politicization of the issue. It leads to the creation of a political question: should we grant refuge? Deliberation on this question changes the context from right of the refugee to decision of the state. Absence of enforceability and ambiguity in the asylum-seeking process has made it extremely discretionary in nature. This has led to the emergence of the idea of selective humanitarianism. Way forward: generating awareness about refugee situations and their rights. Creating awareness about the situation would translate to empathy for refugees and fading of the prevalence of fear against them. This may lead to more social acceptance and faster assimilation. Making objective procedures and authorities accountable. The anxiety and uncertainty faced by the refugees can be ameliorated to a large extent if procedures for granting asylum be made objective and clearly communicated. Also, making the criteria objective could be a first step in holding the authorities accountable and thus moving towards a rights-based approach. Creating an effective transition mechanism. The resolution of the refugee issue remains complicated considering its social, economic, and political implications and thus takes time. In this scenario, it becomes important that an effective transition mechanism is created which can provide at least limited rights to refugees. Strengthening the system of refugee camps. The system of refugee camps has emerged as an effective solution and hence should be adequately funded and managed. Adopting a multilateral approach, states have a limited capacity with regard to fulfillment of refugee rights. In this context, it becomes important that the host country, the source country, the group of refugees and the entities engaged on the ground like NGOs, social groups etc. come together for realization of these rights. Integrating efforts with Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, for making rights accountable. Non-fulfillment of rights directly affects the realization of 16 Sudanese pounds, peace, justice, and strong institutions, and indirectly affects other SDGs. Efforts should be made to make the authorities more accountable by linking refugee rights to the SDG targets. Conclusion: the essence of resolution of the refugee crisis lies in the political economy of providing refuge, i.e., economic cost of refuge and its socio-political implications, and the moral economy of asylum, the values and effects attached to the internationally recognized principle of providing protection to refugees and extent of humanitarianism among the host. Managing these two factors could render a long-term solution to this crisis. Increase in religious activities in schools. Context: the Gujarat government has decided to include Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the school syllabus for classes 6-12. 160. PRAHAAR redefined 3.0 Ethics. Hijab Row. Recently, the government of Karnataka passed an order stating that students of pre-university colleges will have to mandatorily wear the uniform prescribed by the college administrative board. In the absence of any prescription, clothes which disturb equality, integrity and public law and order couldn't be worn. Quote, "You see, spirituality has no religious overtones. The essence of spirituality is to make a person pure in his mind and his thoughts." When I started reading our old scriptures, like the Bhagavad Gita, I found it was useful for day-to-day life, so I started practicing it. I consider it an administrative gospel, one that will help you in doing things like running an organization. E. Sridharan, Metro Man of India. Ethics of Bhagavad Gita. The ethics of Gita are anti-hedonistic. The Gita condemns Kavaka's hedonism. According to the Gita, moral life consists in the regulation of base emotions and instincts. Hence, one must strive to conquer these. Bhagavad Gita means, the Lord's song, that is, the discourse of Lord Krishna to persuade the reluctant Arjuna to perform his dharma. The Gita enjoins the performance of duties for the welfare of humanity, Lok Samagra. The ideal aspirant has to work for humanity in the spirit of perfect detachment, with no desire to reap the fruit. Just as a liberated, cave dweller, in Plato goes back into the cave to free others. Kant's conception of the kingdom of ends comes close to this. However, while Kant's ethics is deontological, the ethics of Gita is teleological. Kant enjoins the renunciation of all feelings and emotions. But the Gita talks about renunciation of only base emotions and passions. It does not negate love and compassion for the creatures. Selfishness shall be renunciated, but selfless humanism ought to be cultivated. The Gita's classification of the specific duties in accordance with one's capability and aptitude comes close to Plato's classification of duties for the different classes of men in an ideal republic. According to some critics, absolutely disinterested action is a psychological impossibility. But, essentially the Gita recommends not the annihilation of all desires but the merging of all desires in one profound supreme desire, the attainment of self-realization or the ideal. Ethics of introducing Bhagavad Gita in school. Directive of daily duties. In view of the fact that the Gita contains a long description of duties concurring to a number of different natures of man, it must be admitted that it affords assistance in the understanding of daily duties. Leadership development. Bhagavad Gita stresses on performance of swadharma, i.e., own duty or dharma. When leadership performs its duties in a righteous way, subordinates also recognize and revere the leadership and follow the path of action. Motivation. Studies have highlighted that most of the reasons behind work-related stress are related to mind, such as pressure of performance, relationships, media pressure, etc. Bhagavad Gita focuses on mind and distinguishes between subconscious and conscious actions to promote sattva and divinity in all, removing jealousy and creating motivation for work. Emotional intelligence. Bhagavad Gita calls for sthitaprajna, i.e., to acquire equanimity or calmness with firm resolve. It can help administrators to have control over senses and build a steadfast resolve towards the goals, objectives. Objectivity in decision making. Bhagavad Gita promotes lok samgraha, i.e., holding all together. It inspires towards universal welfare, inclusive and sustainable development, through firmness of mind and preference to Shreya over Priya, i.e., goodness or objectivity over pleasure or happiness. As verse 22 of chapter 16 says, those who are free from the three gates to darkness endeavor for the welfare of their soul, and thereby attain the supreme goal. Role of Bhagavad Gita in administration. Bhagavad Gita is one of the earliest texts in any tradition to emphasize that it is important not to do one's duty, but to do in a certain kind of way, i.e., detachment. The principle of world welfare provides the basis for assessing the nature of an administrator's duty in a changing world, even when faced with competing duties, as in the case of moral dilemmas. Gita's virtue theory also emphasizes virtues that are indispensable for righteous administration. Virtues such as unagitated mind, Anuvana Manas, 161. PRAHAAR redefined 3.0, Ethics. Firm-mindedness, prajna pratisthita, disinterestedness, anapexis, udasiness, contentment with one's own duty, swakramanirats, indifference to pleasure and pain, being the same towards friend and enemy and towards honor and disgrace, samah satrusye mitrasye. Leadership development, resolution of ethical dilemmas, emotional intelligence. Through the concept of dharma, Gita also identifies the essential ideas and governing principles of our cultural life, and through karma yoga and jnana yoga, also identifies a course of action for man's search for eternal bliss, which is the source of truth and joy. One has the right to work, but never to the fruit of work. The doer has the right to work. The doer has no control on outcomes, fruits of action. The doer has no control on the root cause of the fruits of action. There is no choice to reveal an action. Message of Bhagavad Gita. The message of Bhagavad Gita is that either you can perform your actions with attachment, or you can perform the same without attachment by thinking that nature is performing the actions. Good for society and individuals. Gita's ethics have synthesized both social and individual interests. The individual is not inconsiderable, but his soul and the universal soul are not two separate entities. All distinctions are the result of ignorance. The ultimate end is absolute perfection of the individual, but this perfection can be attained only through consolidation of society and God realization. Theory of division of labor. Gita's conception of the Varna system is not only the equivalent of the modern scientific division of labor, but it is superior in some respects because man does not become entangled with his actions because he fulfills his duty with the intention of God realization. In this way, Gita has also achieved a magnificent synthesis of spiritualism and social welfare. Integrity in actions, central to the scripture, Bhagavad Gita promotes Nishkama Karma, detached involvement, over Sakma Karma, attached involvement. Nishkama Karma or selfless actions will lead to integrity by removing attachments, egoism or actions with personal gain in mind. Synthesis of enjoyment and austerity. Gita's theory of Nishkama Karma Yoga is the supreme means not only from the spiritual viewpoint but also from the practical and worldly viewpoints. It is itself an expert synthesis of action and abstinence, enjoyment and asceticism. Divinization of passion. In spite of the ideal of detachment, Gita's path is natural and integral. It preaches the divinization and transformation of passions and not their repression, as was Kant's contention. Directive of daily duties. In view of the fact that the Gita contains a long description of duties concurring to a number of different natures of man, it must be admitted that it affords assistance in the understanding of daily duties. Based on sound metaphysics, the ethics of Gita is based on sound metaphysics. Although it is theistic, it does not encourage blind faith in any instance. Determinism and freedom of will. Gita has synthesized determinism and freedom of will. It is God who controls the result of action and the order of the world, but in order to become a dynamic instrument of divine action after understanding this order and complete self-submission to God, it is essential to act with determination. Resolution of ethical dilemmas. Nishkama Karma detaches individuals from the results of their action. It can help administrators in resolving conflict between moral imperatives, especially dilemmas caused by conflict between self-interest and public benefit. Universal message of the Gita. The message of Gita is universally comprehensive and everlasting. In today's atomic age, when human society is grievously endangered by excessive materialism, some of the messages of the Gita, like Nishkama Karma Yoga, have assumed an ever greater importance. Gita treasures elements which can faithfully serve as a motive to men of any society and any age. In India, from ancient scholars like Sankara and Ramanuja, men like Gandhi, Tilak and Sri Aurobindo have been inspired by it. 162. PRAHAAR Redefined 3.0 Ethics. Teachings of Bhagavad Gita can play an important role towards effective, accountable, and inclusive governance by guiding public servants on ethical behavior or conduct. It will help in overcoming decision-making issues and create an ethical workplace. Hijab Row. Context. Recently, the government of Karnataka passed an order stating that students of pre-university colleges will have to mandatorily wear the uniform prescribed by the college administrative board. In the absence of any prescription, clothes which disturb equality, integrity and public law and order, couldn't be worn. Ethical issues of hijab. Not an essential practice of religion. Wearing a hijab is not an essential practice of the religion. It is a reflection of culture rather than an accepted interpretation of Islam, and it remains an alien imposition in large areas of the Muslim world. The Supreme Court in 2006 held that keeping a beard was not an essential part of Islamic practices and argued that wearing of the hijab is an essential element of Islam, and its prohibition violates the student's constitutionally guaranteed freedom of religion. Educational institutions such as college spaces ought to be free of any public displays of religion. Against right to freedom, the compulsory wearing of hijab is imposition of the religious tirade on the personal freedom of women and girls. Reflection of patriarchal society, it is also seen as a form of patriarchal dominance. Promotes gender equality and helps in women empowerment. Against uniform dress code, wearing a symbol of religion is the disrespect of rules of dress code in the premises of educational institutions. Why should it be allowed? Against equality, ban is against the tenets of equality to all religions and is seen as a majoritarian suppression of the minorities in a country. Issues of privacy, religious faith is a part of the fundamental right to privacy against secular principle. Protest on choice of clothes is against the ethos of the constitution and composite culture of the country. Encourage rift in society, it leads to polarization of the society by targeting a particular community. International practice, the German model recognizes the value of including religious education in schools. Article 7(3) of the German Constitution permits religious instruction in public schools. However, the participation in such classes is strictly voluntary. In recognition of the growing religious diversity due to immigration, German states have started including Islamic religious content in their schools. Conclusion: religious sentiments should not prevail while taking decisions on such matters, but it should be based on the combination of rationality and modern views. Educational institutions should avoid the violation of the rights of individual students in the name of their right to administer a school or college. Our daily lives require us to live together with people who look different from us, wear different clothing, and eat different food. Why should those differences be shut out from educational spaces in particular? Our Constitution guarantees to everyone an inviolate zone of freedom in personal matters, as long as the effect of this freedom does not cause harm or discrimination at a broader social level. However, an essential religious practices test is required for hijab as it was done for keeping a beard. Bodily rights of women and abortion law. Context: recently, the government has incorporated new rules under the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Amendment Act 2021, which was passed in March 2021. 163 PRAHAAR redefined 3.0 Ethics. About abortion: abortion is the deliberate termination of a pregnancy due to removing an embryo or fetus before it can survive outside the uterus. An abortion that occurs spontaneously is also known as a miscarriage. When deliberate steps are taken to end a pregnancy, it is called an induced abortion, or less frequently an induced miscarriage. Abortion considerations require deep reflection on law, convention, social and religious norms, family contexts, emotions, and relationships. UNICEF India and World Bank data: India has one of the highest numbers of maternal deaths. 45,000 maternal deaths every year, or an average of one maternal death every 12 minutes. Unsafe abortions are the third leading cause of maternal deaths in India. Reasons women give for wanting abortions, worldwide: or disruption of education or employment, or lack of support from father, or poverty, unemployment or inability to bear children, or interrelation problems with husband or partner, or women's feeling that she is too young to have a child. Ethical issues with abortion: an act of taking life. Since life begins at conception, abortion is akin to murder as it is the act of taking human life. It is in direct defiance of the commonly accepted idea of the sanctity of human life. Issues of medical complication: an abortion can result in medical complications later in life. The chances of miscarriage and other health issues also increases. Psychological pain and stress: abortion frequently causes intense psychological pain and stress. Son meta preference: abortion based on sex determination mainly occurs because of preference of baby boy. Punishing unborn child. Abortion punishes unborn child who committed no crime, instead it is the perpetrator who should be punished. Lack of bodily rights. Abortion concerns the autonomy and dignity of the pregnant woman herself. If a woman who is pregnant wishes to stop being pregnant, it cannot be taken away from her. Issues of self-determination, attitudes to pregnancy are, however, intertwined with how society views sex, women, and the fertile woman specifically. Pregnancy and birth are not trivial inconveniences, such as having a headache. They constitute a major life event, which even when desired causes immense discomfort and disruption to many women. History of oppression of women. Abortion is seen as a compromise with liberty, self-respect, self-right on body. Argument in favor of abortion 164. PRAHAAR redefined 3.0. Ethics. Right of women. A female is considered a moral person, she is entitled to rights, including the right to life. So, abortion is deemed acceptable as the fetus is not a person. A list of criteria of personhood is identified, which includes consciousness, reasoning, activity, communication and self-awareness. A fetus undeniably is incapable of fulfilling these criteria. Priority of female over fetus. The mother, who is a person, has a right to life and it supersedes the rights of the fetus to choose whether or not it remains connected to her body. To avoid unwarranted pregnancy, pregnancy is assumed to be a foreseeable consequence of heterosexual intercourse, that too when there is no intention to have a baby. So, denying her the right to abort the child when she was not planning for it, is unwarranted. Health issues of the fetus or mother. Sometimes, delivering a baby could be life-threatening to the mother, in this case abortion of the fetus could be justified. It may be more ethical for a mother to have an abortion to defend herself from the danger to her mental or physical health than continuing with the pregnancy. Gender equality. The right to abortion is vital for gender equality. The right to abortion is vital for individual women to achieve their full potential. Banning abortion puts women at risk by forcing them to use illegal methods that may be more harmful. Way forward. Adoption can be a viable option to abortion-free and informed choice. Bodily rights of women to be protected. Rights of self-determination. Securing privacy of women ensure better medical facility. Conclusion. The decision of whether or not to bear a child is central to a woman's life, to her well-being and dignity. She ought to be the one deciding it for herself. When the government superintends that decision for her, she is being treated as less than a fully adult human accountable for her own choices. We need to bestow much greater support to women who may want to conceive and raise their children, but opting out of it for financial, psychological, health, or relationship reasons. Criminalizing abortion does not stop abortions, it just makes abortion more unsafe. Above all, the right to life should always outweigh the right of an individual to equality or to control their own. Marital rape and conjugal rights. Context. The Delhi High Court recently observed that while there can be no compromise with women's right to sexual autonomy and any act of rape has to be punished. The court questioned as to why the exception from the offense of rape granted to a married couple had remained in the legislature for several years. This exception remained in spite of the wide scope of Section 375 of Indian Penal Code, which included even a single act of unwilling sex as rape. Marital rape. Marital rape can be defined as any unwanted sexual intercourse or penetration obtained by force, threat of force, or when the wife does not give consent. Conjugal rights. Conjugal rights are rights created by marriage, i.e. right of the husband or the wife to the society of the other spouse. The law recognizes these rights, both in personal laws dealing with marriage, divorce etc., and in criminal law requiring payment of maintenance and alimony to a spouse. Ethical issues: violation of the right to live with human dignity. Marital rape violates the right of a woman or wife to live her life with human dignity. The right to live with human dignity forms a part of the right to life, a fundamental right, under Article 21 in the Constitution of India. Issues of sexual privacy. In the case of the state of Maharashtra v. Madhukar Narayan, the Supreme Court held that every woman is entitled to her sexual privacy and it is not open to any and every person to violate her privacy as and whenever one wishes. 165 PRAHAAR redefined 3.0 Ethics. Right to bodily self-determination. Every person has the right to make decisions regarding her body. Similarly, the decision of a woman whether to have sex or not or to give consent is amongst the most individual decisions that a lady holds for herself. It comes as a right to self-expression. Violation of the right to equality. Similarly, the differential treatment of rape and marital rape in India under Section 375 of IPC and differential punishments awarded for both under Section 376 of IPC violates the right to equality before the law, Article 14. Rape not ground for divorce. As marital rape is not a ground for a divorce in any personal laws and even the Special Marriage Act, 1954, it cannot be used as a ground for divorce and cruelty against the husband. Thus, the women remain helpless and keep suffering in silence. Arguments against criminalizing marital rape destabilize marriage as an institution. It may create absolute anarchy in families and destabilize the institution of marriage and thereby destroy the family platform which upholds family values and helps in sustaining the country. Indian society believes that marriage is a sacrament. Misuse of law. It may become an easy tool for harassing the husbands by misusing the law, similar to the growing misuse of Section 498A, harassment caused to a married woman by her husband and in-laws, of the IPC. Awareness is more important. Merely criminalizing marital rape may not stop it, as moral and social awareness plays a vital role in stopping such an act. Burden of proof. The concept of burden of proof is a complex issue. When marital rape would be considered a crime, there will be a burden either on the wife to prove the offense or the husband to prove himself innocent, and therefore it will be very difficult to apply. Against privacy. Some argue that making marital rape a crime would allow the state to interfere in the personal affairs of individuals. This will be a violation of the right to privacy inherent in the right to life guaranteed under Article 21 in the Indian Constitution. Cultural diversity. India has its unique problems due to various factors like literacy, lack of financial empowerment of the majority of females, the mindset of the society, vast diversity, poverty, etc. And these should be considered carefully before criminalizing marital rape. Conclusion. Marital rape is a complex issue that needs a deep and detailed discussion. Criminalizing marital rape will not merely help. Rather, there is a need for rectifying and filling the gaps in existing laws and doing away with archaic ones that tend to function against the well-being of women and the society as a whole. Public consultation and discussion with all the stakeholders may be the way forward. Euthanasia. Context. A 9-year-old boy died of a rare blood disease just within 2 hours after his mother had applied for his mercy killing in court. A famous case, Aruna Shanbag case, was heard in the Supreme Court, SC, and final judgment came in the year 2018, making the right to die in a dignified way a part of right to life under Article 21. Only passive euthanasia is allowed in India by the Supreme Court. About euthanasia. Euthanasia is a controversial issue in medical ethics. It is defined as an act or practice of painlessly putting to death or withdrawing treatment from a person suffering an incurable disease. Euthanasia is intentionally killing another person to relieve his or her suffering. Arguments for euthanasia: right to self-determination. The essence of human life is to live a dignified life, and to force the person to live in an undignified way is against the person's choice. Thus, it expresses the choice of a person, which is a fundamental principle. People have a right to self-determination, and thus should be allowed to choose their own destiny. End of pain. Euthanasia provides a way to relieve the intolerably extreme pain and suffering of an individual. It relieves the terminally ill people from a lingering death. Assisting a subject to die is a better option than continuing to suffer. 166 PRAHAAR Redefined 3.0 Ethics. Treatment for others. In many developing and underdeveloped countries like India, there is a lack of funds. There is a shortage of hospital space. So, the energy of doctors and hospital beds can be used for those people whose life can be saved instead of continuing the life of those who want to die. Dignified death. Article 21 of the Indian Constitution clearly provides for living with dignity. A person has a right to live a life with at least minimum dignity, and if that standard is falling below that minimum level, then a person should be given a right to end his life. Addressing mental agony. The motive behind this is to help rather than harm. It not only relieves the unbearable pain of a patient but also relieves the relatives of a patient from the mental agony. Right-based approach. People got an explicit right to die. Death is a private subject, and if there is no harm done to others, then state and other people have no right to interfere. Libertarian case. Arguments against the euthanasia. Weaken society's respect for the sanctity of life. Human life is sacred. Human lives are special because God created them. Human beings are made in God's image. Therefore, human life should be protected and preserved, whatever happens. Issues of regulation. Accepting euthanasia would mean that some lives, those of the sick or disabled, are worth less than others. It exposes vulnerable people to pressure to end their lives. Value of life. Voluntary euthanasia could start on a slippery slope that may lead to involuntary euthanasia and the killing of people who are thought undesirable. Non-harm. The principle of non-violence. Hinduism and Buddhism regard all life as precious, not just human life. They say that we should try to avoid harming living things, and therefore this also rules out killing people, even if they want to die. Euthanasia might not be in a person's best interests. Issue of care. Permitting euthanasia will lead to less good care for the terminally ill. It could undermine the commitment of doctors and nurses to save lives. Discourage medical research. Allowing euthanasia could discourage the search for new modes of treatment for the terminally ill. Issues of euthanasia. Medical ethics. Medical ethics call for nursing, caregiving and healing, and not ending the life of the patient. In the present time, medical science is advancing at a great pace, making even the most incurable diseases curable today. Thus, instead of encouraging a patient to end his life, the medical practitioners have to encourage the patients to lead their painful life with strength. Moral wrong. Taking a life is morally and ethically wrong. The value of life can never be undermined. Vulnerable people will become more prone to it. Groups that represent disabled people are against the legalization of euthanasia on the ground that such groups of vulnerable people would feel obliged to opt for euthanasia, as they may see themselves as a burden to society. Suicide vs. euthanasia. When suicide is not allowed, then euthanasia should also not be allowed. A person commits suicide when he goes into a state of depression and has no hope from life. Similar is the situation when a person asks for euthanasia. But such a tendency can be lessened by proper care of such patients and showing hope in them. X factor: miracles do happen in our society, especially when it is a matter of life and death. There are examples of patients coming out of coma after years, and we should not forget human life is all about hope. Way forward: achieving peace with God and pain control are nearly identical in importance for patients and bereaved family members. The futile treatment that doesn't have any reasonable chance of doing good other than keeping the patient from dying could be stopped to lessen the agony of the family. At the same time, allowing voluntary euthanasia makes it easier to commit murder, since the perpetrators can disguise it as active voluntary euthanasia. That must be avoided. We should look at the brighter side of it than thinking of it being abused. Ethics of pharmaceutical ecosystem. Context: the Supreme Court termed immoral or illegal the practice of pharmaceutical companies offering freebies to doctors, saying it affects common people by driving up healthcare costs. 167 PRAHAAR redefined 3.0 Ethics. According to the IT department, the $650 maker had distributed freebies of about 1,000 crore rupee to doctors and medical professionals in exchange for promoting its products. These freebies, also referred to as the Doctors' Commission, have always been a part of the system, and pharma companies have handed out gifts, in cash or kind, to medical professionals to prescribe their brand of drug. Can doctors accept freebies from pharmaceutical industries? As per the Indian Medical Council, Professional Conduct, Etiquette and Ethics regulations, medical practitioners are disallowed from accepting emoluments in the form of inter alia gifts, travel facilities, hospitality, cash or monetary grants. Acceptance of freebies could result in a range of sanctions under the regulations, ranging from a censure for incentives costing up to 5,000 rupees to removal from the Indian Medical Register or State Medical Register for periods ranging from 3 months to 1 year. Ethical issues in providing freebies to doctors: misleading the patient. Doctors prescribe medicine brands that have offered them gifts or freebies. Unfair to the patient, owing to the cost incurred by the patients who purchase these medicines. Lack of transparency: such dealings between the doctors and the pharmaceutical companies are done in secrecy. Against the prescribed laws and norms. Defies the Indian Medical Council, Professional Conduct, Etiquette and Ethics regulations. Ethics of Pharmaceutical ECOSYSTEMMEDICAL Ethics. Medical ethics is concerned with the obligations of the doctors and the hospital to the patient, along with other health professionals and society. It is based on the following pillars: beneficence, doing good; non-maleficence, to do no harm; autonomy, giving the patient the freedom to choose freely, where they are able; justice, ensuring fairness. These four principles represent a framework for analyzing the best action to take in a given situation. International case: in countries like the United States, France, Germany, Hungary, Italy, UK, etc., there are stringent laws in place to reduce corruption in the pharma sector. The nexus between pharma firms and doctors continues to increase the sale of medicines. A study found that 7 major pharma companies spent a total of 34,186.95 crore rupees on marketing in 8 years, which significantly increased the price of the drug. Way forward: although there are regulations in place that may get the licenses of doctors revoked for violating the code outlined in the IMC Regulations 2002, there is nothing to hold pharmaceutical companies accountable for the benefits doctors receive. Doctors getting gifts, travel facilities, cash or other monetary benefits, etc. from pharmaceutical companies are subjected to litigation, but pharma firms get away scot-free. Moral dilemmas faced by self-driving cars. Context: Despite the advances made in self-driving technology, there is still no car that is 100% fully autonomous today. While car makers such as Tesla, General Motors, etc. have developed features such as pedestrian detection, lane departure warnings, traffic sign recognition, and blind spot detection, fully automated self-driving vehicles likely won't be ready anytime before 2030. Pros of driverless technology. Social advantage. Driverless cars have the potential to transform society in positive ways. It can increase mobility for senior citizens and the disabled for efficiency and convenience. 168 PRAHAAR Redefined 3.0 Ethics. Road safety. Higher levels of vehicle automation are also expected to increase road safety by reducing traffic accidents and, ultimately, preventing them altogether. Many self-driving vehicles are equipped with advanced driver assistance systems, which prevent drivers from drifting out of their lanes or help them stop in time to avoid a crash or reduce its severity. Protect environment. Driverless technology can be beneficial for society by lowering carbon emissions and paving the way for more sustainable ways of living. Cons of driverless technology. Vehicle malfunctions, for instance, can be a safety hazard for road users. Last year, Tesla came under investigation after its vehicles operating on autopilot crashed into parked emergency vehicles. Vulnerable to cyber attacks, since they are primarily software-driven products compared to traditional cars. As they become increasingly dependent on software to operate, there are growing concerns that hacking and cyber attacks could compromise the proper functioning of self-driving cars and pose a threat to both drivers and car manufacturers. Lack of clear regulations to govern the self-driving car industry. The lack of regulatory clarity has legal implications, including the issue of liability. It raises the question, when cars can operate themselves, are accidents the responsibility of the manufacturer or the driver? Ethical issues involved in self-driving cars. Testing of self-driving cars on public roads. Despite their potential to improve road safety, the testing of AVS on public roads could put unwitting drivers at risk. This highlights the moral dilemma that car makers, regulators, and the public face. Does automated vehicles regulation create safer roads for people, or will it slow the adoption of driverless technologies that can reduce traffic accidents? Ability of the machines in making moral decisions. While the introduction of autonomous vehicles may reduce the number of road accidents, such events cannot be ruled out based on past records. In the event of a crash, ethical decisions have to be made, which often puts people in a moral quandary, based on a study by researchers from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Absence of consensus on moral code. Moral principles that guided drivers' decisions varied from country to country and men to women as both each viewed the situation differently from an ethical point of view. Way forward, it is important to broaden the public discussion from a focus on the crash behavior of vehicles to the many types of social change that automated vehicle technology can be involved in. These include looking at factors such as required levels of safety, the distribution of responsibilities between regulators and vehicle providers, and the trade-offs between privacy and other interests. In particular, policymakers, car makers, and the public will need to develop an agreement on compromises and prioritization among these ethical considerations. Ethics of war. Context. Just war theory. The most famous way of ethically assessing war is to use just war theory. A tradition going back to St. Augustine in the 5th century and St. Thomas in the 13th century. Just war theory considers the reasons for going to war, jus ad bellum, and the conduct of war, jus in bello. A war might be ethical but the means unethical, for instance, using landmines, torture, chemicals, drones, etc. Russia-Ukraine conflict. About the just war theory. Just war theory sets out principles for a war to be ethical. The war must be waged by a legitimate authority, usually states, in a just cause waged with right intention. Have a strong probability of success 169. PRAHAAR redefined 3.0 Ethics. Be a last resort, be proportional. In addition, there are three principles for conduct in war: discrimination, distinguishing between enemy combatants and non-combatants; proportionality, the harms must be proportional to the gains; actions must be militarily necessary. Consequences of war: loss of life and cause of misery. Mass destruction of property. Negatively impacts the economy and the source of livelihood of the people. Denial of basic human rights. The idea of military ethics. Military ethics is an interdisciplinary study, incorporating concerns about the conduct of war, decisions on how and when to engage in military operations, and issues relating to the moral psychology and care of those who serve and of veterans of military service. Military ethics focuses on the core values and moral principles that collectively govern the men and women serving in the military forces of nations around the world, as members of what is sometimes termed the military profession, or the profession of arms. Way forward: international agreements and conventions. The Geneva Conventions and their additional protocols are at the core of international humanitarian law, the body of international law that regulates the conduct of armed conflict and seeks to limit its effects. They specifically protect people who are not taking part in the hostilities: civilians, health workers and aid workers, and those who are no longer participating in the hostilities, such as wounded, sick and shipwrecked soldiers and prisoners of war. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR, is a milestone document in the history of human rights. The declaration was proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in Paris on the 10th of December 1948, General Assembly Resolution 217A, as a common standard of achievements for all peoples and all nations. It is a document that acts like a global roadmap for freedom and equality, protecting the rights of every individual, everywhere. Ethics of early embryo research. Context. Embryonic stem cell research forces one to choose between two moral principles: the duty to prevent or alleviate suffering, the duty to respect the value of human life. To obtain embryonic stem cells, the early embryo has to be destroyed. This means destroying a potential human life. But embryonic stem cell research could lead to the discovery of new medical treatments that would alleviate the suffering of many people. So which moral principle should have the upper hand in this situation? The answer hinges on the view of the embryo. Does it have the status of a person or not? Ethical arguments in favor of early embryo research. Embryo is not exactly a child yet, because unless it is embedded in the uterus wall, it will never have the chance to develop into a baby. Every year fertility clinics create many embryos that are destroyed because they are made in surplus. Using cells from these surplus embryos for research and developing medical treatments could help improve and save people's lives, which is much better than throwing them away. 170. PRAHAAR redefined 3.0 Ethics. Ethical arguments against early embryo research. Potential to develop into a full human, hence, killing it during research would amount to killing a life. Religious perception: it believes that soul enters the body at the moment of conception. Human beings are not things. Their lives must not be sacrificed against their will, even for the sake of good ends, like saving other people's lives. Way forward, all research on stem cells must be conducted in an ethical and scientifically responsible manner. Key terms. Key terms. Cognitive dissonance, mental conflict, forced compliance behavior, conflicting beliefs, beneficence, confidentiality, do no harm, bandwagon effect, consumer-centric approach, digital etiquettes, whole-of-society approach, greatest good for the greatest number, categorical imperative, compassionate ground, principles of natural justice, harm minimization, nishkama karma, non-maleficence, military ethics, just war theory. Commitment, integrity and devotion, code of conduct and code of ethics, citizens charter, coercive corruption and collusive corruption, e-governance. PYQS. PYQS here. 1. Online methodology is being used for day-to-day meetings, institutional approvals in the administration and for teaching and learning in the education sector to the extent telemedicine in the health sector is getting popular with the approvals of the competent authority. No doubt it has advantages and disadvantages for both the beneficiaries and the system at large. Describe and discuss the ethical issues involved in the use of online methods, particularly to vulnerable sections of society. 2022. Though the Russia and Ukraine war has been going on for the last 7 months. Different countries have taken independent stands and actions keeping in view their own national interests. We are all aware that war has its own impact on the different aspects of society, including human tragedy. What are those ethical issues that are crucial to be considered while launching the war and its continuation so far? Illustrate with justification the ethical issues involved in the given state of affair. 2022. Theme. Impact of digital technology as a reliable source of input for rational decision making is a debatable issue. Critically evaluate with suitable examples. 2021. 4. Refugees should not be turned back to the country where they would face persecution or human right violation. Examine the statement with reference to the ethical dimension being violated by the nation claiming to be democratic with open society. 2021. 5. Education is not an injunction, it is an effective and pervasive tool for all-round development of an individual and social transformation. Examine the new education policy, 2020, NEP, 2020, in light of the above statement. 2020. Chair. The current internet expansion has instilled a different set of cultural values which are often in conflict with traditional values. Discuss. 2020. 7. Some recent developments such as introduction of RTI Act, media and judicial activism, etc. are proving helpful in bringing about greater transparency and accountability in the functioning of the government. However, it is also being observed that at times the mechanisms are misused. Another negative effect is that the officers are now afraid to make prompt decisions. Analyze this situation in detail and suggest how this dichotomy can be resolved. Suggest how these negative impacts can be minimized. 2015. 8. At the international level, the bilateral relations between most nations are governed on the policy of promoting one's own national interest without any regard for the interest of other nations. This leads to conflicts and tensions between the nations. How can ethical consideration help resolve such tensions? Discuss with specific examples. 2015.